Their numbers are incredible. Management loves them. They're praised, protected, and given opportunities because they consistently deliver results. But then the exit interviews start. People who worked with this person say things like, they're really great at getting results, but they're terrible to work with. They're brilliantly technically, but destructive interpersonally. They hit every target, but leave a trail of damage behind them. So the problem isn't their output. The output is real, it's measurable, it's valuable. The problem is what leaders have chosen to reward. And the cost of that decision eventually spreads through the entire organization. And so today we're talking about why confidence, charisma, and strong financial results often get mistaken for high value, why organizations tolerate behavior they shouldn't, and why toxic high performers continue to get promoted, and what happens when leaders confuse performance with character. Because chances are this is happening somewhere in your organization right now, and you may not even realize it. Here to talk about this is David Cohen, founder of DS Cohen and Associates and author of Selecting the Best, which is a book he wrote, which we will link in the show notes for you to have access to. So check out his book and stay tuned as we dive into this really great conversation. David, confidence can be misleading. I know I've been sold a few things by really confident people and realized later that it wasn't the case. Why do organizations protect these people who deliver results but damage culture?
Well, thanks for asking the question. It's an age-old story. It started, with snake oil salesmen way back when they would convince you to buy this stuff because they're confident. People who come across with confidence, with a story they're enthusiastic about, without that hesitation, they are people that we have a tendency to want to believe because they sound like they've got their act together. So during the interview, it's where it starts. The hiring manager is fooled by an overconfident person. The analogy I use is the difference between the camera and the film, the picture and the actual film itself. The picture that's captured is a point in time. So it's like when you're given the psychometric tests of the big five or whatever, it just captures that person of who they are in that moment, of what they are, their trait that they're inclined to do. It doesn't tell you that they will actually live that trait. It just says at this point in time, this is it. What you're really looking for is not the picture. You're trying to look at the film. You're trying to look at the motion picture. What are the actions behind that picture that actually capture it? So the metaphor of we either can, the interview could be a confident person who gives you a great picture of what they want you to perceive versus understanding the actions behind it, the motion picture, the film, which actually tells you the person do it. Because often we're fooled and think that can do is will do. And can do is only can do. It doesn't mean
Mhm.
I can do it, but will I choose to do it is really what we should be looking for. And what we should be looking for on the choose to do it are do they fit the actions, the behaviors, the values of the organization? And if they don't, no matter how confident they are, well, it's not time to really do it. It's like, you know, if I say to them, are you a good team player? And their psychometric test says they're a good team player and they get along with people, but that's only the picture. The motion, that's only the moment in time. The picture I'm really looking for is the story behind tell me about a time when you disagreed with people on your team about an approach that you felt secure about,
Sure
confident
about.
about. I need to listen to those, not the confidence, but the actual actions behind it. But once I hire that person, because I am confident that they are going to be successful and they are successful, it reinforces that I hired the right person without looking at the behaviors. And therefore, that person runs into conflict with everybody they're working with, and morale in the organization starts to decrease.
I feel like I've been in so many situations where the strong performers, the leaders overlook their bad behavior. Do you think we've accidentally created workplaces that reward visibility more than value? And what does that cost an organization? Because I know for me, I was so irritated um, that they would get special treatment. Their behavior wasn't the greatest. They weren't really liked, but they were a strong performer. So I felt like they could get away with everything. They would show up late, they would leave early. Um, yeah, it's like an icky feeling when you're surrounded by that.
Yes, absolutely, because confidence is reinforced by this person being successful, making the manager look good, getting the numbers. So
Hmm.
we interpret that as their truth, and it becomes a self-fulfilling perpetual prophecy that the person I hired because I was confident they're confident is now showing they can get the numbers. And that gives me reassurance that I've hired the right person and therefore I stick with them. What they're not looking at is the downside. And Gallup came out recently with a survey that said that organizations in the United States alone are losing $2 trillion a year based on bad employee experiences. And those bad employee
Wow.
experiences are often connected to exactly that perceived superhero because they get the numbers without considering what's the impact on the rest of the organization. So that creates a bad employee experience because the employee experience is, employee engagement is that snapshot of that picture. At that point in time on that day, this is what people felt. But the employee experience is more like a flow of a river that goes over time that says during the flow of this river, there's been different incidents, different things have happened, and the accumulative feeling is the experience. So, employee surveys that capture that moment in time, they're nice. They can get you a most admired business, but it's not going to get you employees that are having a positive experience.
What happens to trust when employees see different rules for different people? Like when I was seeing that person coming in late, leaving early, and not just get it, there's no consequences for their actions, but then another person would get, spoken to about that behavior. What
Well,
does that
that
do to an organization?
that destroys employee experience. That
Hmm.
destroys trust. In other words, the organization people are used to a pattern of behavior, and that pattern of behavior is aligned with what their expectations are. So if I expect that the boss is going to say certain things about certain behavior and does to everybody except this person, and this person is associated with the person who is getting the best results or is coming up with solving problems that others aren't, but as you said, leaves a wake of disaster behind them, then I lose trust in that leader and I lose respect for that leader. But it's really interesting because if that happens all the time, you lose respect for the leader, but you have a confident trust that they'll always behave differently to people that get the results they want. And if you don't get the results they want, they treat you different. You can trust they'll have a certain reaction at a certain time, but have no respect for them. So you have to have, for leaders to be successful, they have to have the combination of respect and trust. Because without that, they're not going to win over any popularity contest or the hearts of their employees to go above and beyond.
Have you seen like firsthand situations where one person costs the company far more than their revenue contribution? Like, do you have examples of where one person has kind of spoiled the whole carton of eggs per se?
Yeah, there's quite a few. Unfortunately, there's quite a few. I, you know,
Mhm.
I, I have a 2x2 grid where on the vertical side, I put behaviors. On the horizontal side, on the bottom, across the bottom, I'll put results. So if you're high on results and high on behaviors, you're in the top right hand quadrant. And I call those, those are your heroes, those are your superstars. They do everything right. If I look at the bottom left hand corner where they're low on behaviors and they're low on results, that's deadwood. Why are they even in the organization? Then there's those people that are kind of like Bambi. They get all the behaviors right. Everybody loves them. They're not getting the results. The problem is to reskill those people to a job where they can be successful and move them into the star category. Don't get rid of them. Keep them. Because if you get rid of somebody who lives the values, exemplifies the right behaviors, you're telling other people that doing the right thing doesn't really matter. That
Mhm.
leaves the bottom right-hand corner. Those are the people who are high on results and low on behaviors. I call those viruses because, like a virus, every time you reward them, you send the message to everybody else in the organization that this is the right behaviors. Getting
Mhm.
results counts more than doing the right thing. Our values are wall decor. They're not really values. They're nice to put out there to maybe attract a new employee, but once they're here, they're not going to be attracted. They're going to find that, they joined an organization thinking that it's a rose garden and find out it's nothing but thorns.
Mhm.
However, what's an example? I have a couple of them. I was dealing with one organization many years ago that we were doing the values with, and we articulated them. They were they were held by most everybody except one person in the organization, and that was a marketing manager. And the marketing manager was doing all sorts of things which were totally unacceptable and was really abusive towards mostly female staff. And I said to the myself and other people on my team said to the CEO, do not put these values out there because they're not honest, they're not lived by everybody on the executive team, and they're going to cause you problems because the expectation is once the values are expressed like that, everybody lives them, and if you don't, you're let go. It's about 6 months later, he called me up and said it's time to let the roll the values out. And I said, well, what happened with the marketing manager? And they said, I fired him.
Mhm.
And what happened when I fired him, he said, was even more interesting. Two of my top marketing people came to me and said they were just about ready to accept jobs at competitors because they couldn't stand working with this guy anymore. And now that I fired him, they're going to stake around. That would have been a massive disaster. I mean, there's so many of these. I had a CEO once who we put the values out there, and everybody in the organization thought it was great. They were living them. And all of a sudden, I got a phone call from the head of HR who says, we put these values out here, but people are complaining about this one person in this one division because they're not behaving according to the values. And it's like really causing problems in cross-functional team meetings. And I said, well, what's the problem? And they said their executive who reports to the CEO is getting great results. They're the virus. They're making that person look really good. They're doing all the things they said they're going to do as far as changing systems and everything else. And those changes are producing results, but they're not following the behaviors at all. And they're running roughshod over everybody, not even informing people of what's happening. So they asked me if I would talk to the CEO about ensuring that there's alignment between values and behaviors and results. And he said that his values were aspirational. He didn't really care as long as she was getting the results from her division, and that he was going to consider her successful. And he didn't really care because we don't have to live them, they're aspirational. My approach was once you put them out there, they're no longer aspirational. Once you put
Mhm.
them out there, you've got to live them. It's a promise you're making to your employees. This is how you expect to be treated. And he just ended the conversation by saying that my work at the organization was no longer desired. So I
Hmm.
happily left. And within about 3 months, some of the key HR people left also. And he also
Yeah.
lost some key middle managers who were holding the place together. Was it a
Hmm.
negative impact on the organization? Totally. I can give you others. Everybody, every organization, not every, many organizations have this virus condition because people are more concerned about their bottom line than they are about the actual success of the organization. And from a long term perspective, they have this short term mentality. What am I doing in the next 90 days to prove that we're viable? Instead of thinking about what are we going to do in the next 5 to 10 years to prove that we're not only viable, but successful and we have sustained our reputation.
It's interesting because it's not only like confidence can be misleading in so many ways. And if someone is really charismatic as well, I also find that personalities can conflict. And so, I mean, CEOs and leaders are just like anybody. And so they sometimes have a difficult time honing that person in because of many different things, not only like that they're bringing in money and like making the bottom line, but the personality conflict and they're just it's hard to resolve for some reason, even though it's obvious the difficult conversations don't happen.
I want to be clear. I'm not being critical of being confident. Confidence is a good thing. It's a valuable skill. It's when it's backed up by the behaviors that align to the organization's values that it's successful. In the
Hmm.
case you're talking about, where you have these different confident people that clash with each other, they're saying their values are more the bottom line, and it's okay to clash as long as you get me the results. And so
Mm.
they have a fear. And then this is what happened in one financial institution I was working with. The CEO had a fear that there was one top producer in the marketplace that was always among his top 1% producers, but he was definitely a virus. And his fear was, if I get rid of this person, that we're going to lose significant grounds and market share. And he allowed this person to get away with really being difficult. And morale was sinking in the area this guy was working with. And finally, he didn't put up with it. He fired the person, and he found out something that a lot of people find out. Other people didn't like this person either. And as soon as he fired him and replaced him, his bottom line improved. So it's
Wow.
really interesting that if you have the courage to do the right thing, the results turn out to be a lot better because people are looking for you to do the right thing, and not having the courage to do the right thing causes people to have a bad experience. And a bad
Hmm.
experience leads to, safety issues, leads to absenteeism, things not getting done on time, lack of commitment, turnover, and all these things they don't look at those as financial issues. They're looking at the bottom line of what the person's bringing in. But reality, those start to build up for financial issues, which far exceed what the person's bringing in. So I would say, you know, if you have values and you know the person's not behaving correctly, work with them, get them a coach if they're coachable, get them support. And remember, behavior is a function of its consequences. And what you have done by celebrating this person's victories and not paying attention to the behaviors, you have rewarded this person so they feel without reservation their behaviors are successful. So the consequence of you giving this person recognition, letting them stay on the job, whatever, promoting them to a new position, you're reinforcing that their behavior is acceptable. So the consequence of their behavior is acceptable. If their behavior is not acceptable, change the way you reward them and talk to them and the consequences because it's not going to work. unless you change the consequences.
Yeah, it's really interesting that once you get rid of that high performer who's toxic, the organization celebrates that and then they want to put more effort in. I've seen people step up after a toxic person has been let go or has left, and the whole place changes and they end up being so much more successful. It's so interesting. How do you measure someone's impact on culture, though?
Well, that's a really interesting question. And if we had the right answer for that, you and I'd make a lot of money. But because there's many different ways you can, people make a mistake and they use these culture indexes, but those indexes are somebody else's definition of what the right culture is. They're not your definition of what the right culture is. So, in order to understand the right culture, you have to understand your values and the consequences you put out there, the celebrations, the way things are set up, the ergonomics of the organization, and see if people are aligned to them. There is no one. I get confident in speaking about the fact that you cannot impose a culture on somebody that is not aligned with their values, their
Mhm,
beliefs, and therefore what the right culture is for your organization that is going to create success and have a positive employee experience in your organization can be very different from another organization. So, using one standard to measure organizations' culture's success is, to me, a very misleading road that's going to cause you all sorts of problems because it's going to cause you to behave in a way that's not natural for you. So you've got to say, this is our culture, and we're going to measure against this. The employee experience you're going to have is you can have confidence that whatever is happening, we are going to behave this way. So if we run into a problem, and make a decision, it's going to be aligned with these behaviors, these values. If we
mm,
don't make the decision aligned with those values, we have not sustained a good culture.
mm,
And that to me is the way of understanding, is the organization making decisions? I often say to senior leaders, if you look at the decisions you made in the last 6 months, does every one of them align with your values? And their answer most of the time is, well, there's one or two that don't. And I say, well, what was the consequence of the impact on the people that were impacted by that decision? Were they confused? Were they, well, some left, went on sick leave. We're not getting the results we expected. Well, because you have spoiled the dance for them. They were dancing according to a certain rhythm, and all of a sudden you change the beat without telling them, and they're not ready for that. Now, you can't change values. That's the problem. A lot of consultants and a lot of, different people say, well, we can change the culture. Well, if a value is a strongly held belief, emotionally charged, resistant to change, and universally applied, coming one day and saying, well, we are no longer going to be cooperative. We're going to focus on individual success. And everybody has been working and celebrating being cooperative. And now all of a sudden I'm setting up a competitive situation. People are going to get confused. They're not going to want to work there anymore.
mm,
Values evolve slowly. And according to a lot of the research I've done and a lot of psychiatrists, psychological theory, your values are in place by usually 30 years of age. And they will change with a significant emotional event in your life, but that's very rare. So if you have hired people according to your values and you don't act in contra or allow people in the organization to contradict the behaviors of those values, you're going to have a positive environment, a positive culture, a good employee experience. But if you are confusing them with treating different people differently, conflicting the values in one area and counteracting them in another, and treating you according to whatever, people are going to be confused. What's going on here? We like
Mm,
predictability, and those values give us that comfort of predictability. They're like the comfort food of an organization.
absolutely. Let's talk about your book. So you wrote Selecting the Best, and I'm curious as to how overconfidence shows up in the hiring process. So can you give us some examples of clues that might show up that someone may deliver results but struggle with relationships?
Yeah, let me give you one very specific one. I was asked by one of the financial institutions here in Canada to help with an interview process, to actually conduct the interview for a very senior position where the business strategy was going to change from an audit process, which had been historic part of the bank's process, to a more customer focused process. And there were a number of people that they wanted to interview that were had high visibility. And this one person comes in to the interview. His resume is impeccable. He's worked internationally. He is dressed immaculately for a banker of 30 years ago or 25 years ago, whenever this was. Neatly pressed, every hair in place. Everything looks good on paper. And I'm talking to him and asking him behavioral questions, not about will he do, what will he do, what what can you do, but what you will do. And he keeps focusing on the can do. I have done this and I have done that. And he had confidence up the gazoo. He was like forceful. He rehearsed himself. His presence was there. And I kept saying, well, let's peel away, you know, the outcome and tell me how you got to the outcome.
Right.
What actions did you take? Draw a picture for me. Write a movie script that I can, what are the directions you're giving to the actors to play you in this movie? And he said, he wanted to focus only on the outcome.
Mm,
And he said, if I ask him one more time what the outcome is about the behavior, he was going, he was going to walk out. And he did.
wow.
And when I called up the executive that was hiring this, who knew this person, his reaction was twofold. One, I put him on the list as a favor to a friend. And number two, if you recommended him, I knew you weren't doing your job.
Uh,
So, yeah, they come across. Now, he got a job right away. Matter of fact, he got two job offers. He lost the job he took in 6 months.
wow.
But the fact is, he came across confident, polished, assured of himself, told a good story about the outcome, but never told anybody how he got the outcome. So that's
Interesting.
why, and that's most interviews focus on the outcome. Most interviews start with the outcome. I mean, you need to know the outcome,
Mhm.
but along the way, you need to know what was the situation, what were the behaviors that you used in that situation? How did it impact people? And when did it happen? Because the other problem with these interviews that people have, even if they have the behavior, people sort of, if they have a confident story, they'll use that behavior to justify hiring the person, but the behavior happened 10 years ago and hasn't happened since. And if the
Right.
behavior happened 10 years ago and hasn't happened since, the likelihood of it happening again is very low. So
Mm,
one thing I focus on also is time frame. When did this behavior happen? So if it happened over 2 years ago, less likely it's going to happen now. So
mm.
what was the situation? What was the behavior? What was the outcome? What was the time frame? SBOT. And if you can follow that pattern of breaking down answers, you get people with confidence past the outcome only.
Yeah, it's interesting. And that person that got those two jobs and then later lost it 6 months later, that cost an organization so much money and time. Like it's such a waste of time. It's so important to consistently choose the right people. What traits consistently predict long term success, if any?
Well, I don't think any traits predict success because those are can do behaviors. You know, the psychometric test tells you what I can do. It doesn't mean I'm going to do it. And it's not, you know, it's a, it's a self-fulfilling kind of thing because I use the test and some people are successful using the test. I believe the test is good, but there are those that are not. So the psychometric test, there was a great article in the New York Times many years ago in the magazine section that drew an analogy of psychometric tests are like horoscopes. And they're not really, they're great to talk about if you're meeting somebody at a bar, what your horoscope is, what your psychometric test results are, but they're not going to get much further than that. Now, I know a lot of people are going to object to that, but that's the reality, in my opinion. And so we have to get beyond that and look at what is unique about our organization. For instance, I can tell you I worked with different automotive companies, and some of the automobile makers are follow very strict rules of follow a hierarchy, and the higher you are, the more right you are in the organization. There was a gentleman coming into the one of my clients, which was a logistics company, and they were going to hire this person from one of the automotive manufacturer that is about hierarchy and about senior management's always right, et cetera, et cetera. And that was not the behaviors of this organization. But they were impressed by his resume and his confidence and the things he'd done. All his outcomes were very impressive. And I said to them, when you go to dinner tonight, here are two questions that will tell you whether he'll align with your behaviors. And they had a contract literally in their pocket to offer this guy that night. And the next day when they came to work, I said, so did you give him the contract? And they said, no, we asked them the two questions. We had a very nice dinner and we told them that the process will continue. We didn't tell them that we're not going to hire him, but we're not going to hire him because he doesn't fit our values. He fits the values of that organization. He fits their behaviors. That's why he's successful. He would not be successful here. So
Right.
you need to be able to look at that and understand that.
What do you think is more dangerous than a low performer who everyone recognizes or a high performer that everyone protects?
If I understood the question correctly, a high performer that drives everybody nuts is a virus and should be gone from the organization. A low performer who has all the right behaviors, everybody respects, everybody gets along with, has the right values, re-educate them, reskill them, find the place where their skill and knowledge works so they can become a high performer. Because as I've
Right.
often said, when you let that keeper go, it's like shooting Bambi's mother. If you can let
Mhm.
that person go, you can let anybody go. And
Mhm.
that's not a good sign because the message you're giving there is the values aren't really important because if you live them, you're still in risk of losing your job. It's a
Mhm.
combination of can I do the job and can I do the job and achieve the outcomes using the right behaviors. If I don't have that equation, it's not going to work.
Yeah, 100%. What do you want listeners to remember from today's conversation, or what message would you like to get across today?
Well, first, they should buy the book because all of this is in the book.
Yes.
Selecting the best. I outline how to do it, how to identify the behaviors, how to identify your values, which are authentic to your organization, and apply that to an interview process. I think that if people can understand that it's a combination of things, it's what I have in my bag of tricks that says I can do these things, coupled with the behaviors that say I will do these things, is the right answer. That values are not tree hugging, tree kissing, HR kind of activities. They are hardcore business results. And They're the reason that organizations in Europe, like Michelin, Boehringer, and others who've been around for hundreds of years, are still around, because those organizations look at long-term results, but also are very, very strict about looking at the behavioral alignment to the values of the organization, because they know that that alignment to the organization's values will cause good long-term employees, which have long-term results. So I think that organizations have to stop focusing on these 90-day reports, which cause you to do the wrong thing, and start focusing on long-term success, focused on financial long-term success coupled with doing the right thing. I don't think anybody wants to be known for doing the wrong thing.
No, and it costs so much more than we could ever predict. When you, like we were talking about earlier, rewarding the wrong behaviors, it just it's like planting a seed that's corrupt, and it just starts growing and growing and growing and growing, and then next thing you know, it's like the whole environment is so toxic, and you can feel that heaviness when you walk in a place like that, even as an outsider. No one really needs to even say anything. You can feel that. You can
You
feel
do
that
feel it.
tension.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that weed that grows relentlessly. And,
Hmm.
you know, the impact that people don't understand is the cost of having to replace an employee far exceeds the cost of their salary,
Hmm.
because people think, well, it's the cost of the recruiter, the cost of this, the cost of that. And a lot of organizations say it's 25% or 30% of the person's salary. No, it's what has been the morale. How much, when people, that seat was empty, you overworked other people, they had to do more with less, and you caused them stress. You, the fact that you had to pay out the person a severance package, it
Hmm.
all adds up to significant money to replace
Hmm.
somebody. Get it right the first time, you save all that, and you save the emotional impact.
Yeah. I guess my last question is this. What if there is a behavior that's rewarded that shouldn't be, or if a high performer gets away with bad behavior, is there a certain way you can come back from that without harming culture? Like, how do you, because we all make mistakes. It's going to happen all the time. Is there a way to come back from that without harming the culture too much? Or is it
Actually,
best to just release that person?
well, I think that you, first of all, the humanist in me says, get that person a coach, point it out. A lot of people just don't know that they're acting wrong because they have
Hmm.
been successful doing a certain thing, and we'll make that adjustment. Might take time, might take coaching, might take a different way of rewarding them. As I said, the consequences have to change, and that person will become successful. The
Hmm.
interesting part is, if you don't do that, you will destroy your culture. So,
Right.
like the one example I gave where people stayed with the organization because he let that one person go, the message by dealing with that bad behavior is you really care about your culture and your values and your people. Not dealing with the bad behavior will send you down a slippery slope that is not going to have a good ending.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you so much for being here today and for talking about this. I mean, I see it happening all the time, and I'm always approached by super confident people. So it's a really important conversation to have.
Yeah, it is. Thank you. Glad we could do it.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. And so thank you to our audience for tuning in. Just a reminder that the best employee isn't always the person producing the biggest numbers. Sometimes the most valuable people are the ones building trust, supporting others, solving problems, and making everyone around them better. Results matter, performance matters, but character matters too. When leaders reward results at any cost, eventually that cost does show up in turnover, in culture, and in trust. And so it's in the people that have quietly decided they've had enough. To learn more about David Cohen and his work and his book, Selecting the Best, please check out the show notes for links to learn more about him. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. We do read them and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Take care. Until next time.